So today's video is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time, and it has to do with URLs and single page applications. And we're going to be working with Remix and React today, but this problem is something I've seen folks run into for many years, going way back to my time writing Ember back in 2012. So it's not specific or new to React, but it is something I see come up time and time again. So today we're going to nip it in the bud. We're going to understand exactly how to add query params to a React app, and we're going to see some of the problems folks run into along the way. So for today's video, we're going to be looking at this little screen right here. And this is a table that is coming from Tailwind UI. Like I mentioned in the last video, this is a premium set of components. We're going to be using the sortable table right here. So you can kind of see this is coming from this demo. This is a set of paid components. Again, Adam over at Tailwind Labs was nice enough to let me use it for this video. I'm going to make all the source code for everything we write today free. So thanks again to him, and definitely check out Tailwind UI if you haven't already. But let's go ahead and come over to our app. And so far, we basically just have that Tailwind component pasted in right here. You know, none of this is working. It's all static. The only thing I've done is create some fake people up here using Faker. This is pretty cool. We can get an array of 20 people. We get their first name, their last name using these handy methods. The email method actually takes a first and last name, so you can see these look pretty realistic. Pretty handy little method right there. And then if we go ahead and find this, we're mapping over these and rendering our table rows. So that's the only change that I've made. And what we want to do is implement sorting on these column headers. So you can see the design has an arrow indicating we should be sorting by title. But again, if we click on these, nothing works. That is our job. That's what our product manager came and asked us to do. So let's get started over here in the top of our component. And we're going to drive this sorting with some React state. So we are going to grab useState from React. And let's call this sort and set sort. And we'll start this off as null. Now, if we scroll down to our table headings, right here is name, which is right here. And we'll see from Tailwind, we get an A tag, an anchor tag. But our job is to just make this table sortable on the client. That's what we were asked to do. So we don't want these to be anchors. We want them to be buttons. And buttons have an onClick method. And we're going to go ahead and use this to set sort to name. So now if we come back, let's go ahead and log sort. Pop open our console. And there we'll see we have sort is null. And if we click on name, we see name is set. So now we can use this React state to go ahead and sort our list of people. So let's go ahead and create a sorted people array, which is going to be people.sort. And this takes in a function with 2 people, and it returns a number, -1 or +1 or 0, determining the sort order. So from each person, we want to grab whatever key is currently set in our React state. So it's going to be name. And we're going to use this handy JavaScript method called locale compare. And we'll pass in bsort right here. So this is going to compare the name of A to the name of B, return a number, either -1, +1, or 0. And that'll give us this array of sorted people. Now we see we're getting an error trying to read locale compare of undefined. Let's go ahead and guard this. That should fix that. And if we find people.map, here's where we're iterating over everyone in the table. Let's just replace this with sorted people. Okay, let's try it out. We see the table renders good here. And if we click name, look at that. Sorted table. Our job's done. Okay, it's actually not. Let's go ahead and get these arrows to actually show when we're sorting by a particular column. So first we're going to see that we lost this font semi-bold on the button because of how buttons are styled. So we'll just move this to the button. And then let's add some conditional styling based on whether we're sorting by this property. So we'll see in the example here, it has title being sorted. And if we just wrap these properties, we can see our name has some different properties: invisible, text gray 400, whereas the active one should be text gray 900, background, and this hover class. So right here, we'll turn this into an expression, and we'll say if sort is equal to name, we'll add some classes. Otherwise, we'll add some other classes. And so we can come down, grab all of these, throw these in here. Otherwise, we'll grab invisible, all of these, and I think rounded is in both, so that's a base class. We'll go ahead and remove these from the static list. And now if we click on this, we get our little active icon. So that looks pretty good. Next, let's go ahead and make it so when we click this again, we switch this from ascending sort to a descending sort. It's kind of the behavior you would expect with a table like this. And so to do this, we want a little bit more logic here on our button. And at this point, I think it would be good to go ahead and extract a component, just so we have a nice tidy place to do that work. So let's call this a sortable column. I'm going to grab all of this markup and return it. And up here, we can replace this with sortable column. Okay, so let's follow these errors. We need to pass in sort as a prop. So let's do that. We also want to be able to pass in the actual content right here as children. So let's go ahead and expose children and render it right here. And then instead of hard coding this name property right here, let's go ahead and pass in a prop of name. So we'll expose that, and we'll just set sort to prop. And finally, instead of calling set sort right here, let's actually just add an on-click prop, and this will call set sort. We'll need the param, so we'll go ahead and pass sort from our component here, so that up here in our parent, we can keep kind of all the state management right there. And so this is going to be an on-click prop, and we'll just call that instead. So now with any luck, we can refresh, we can click this, and we're kind of back to where we started. Okay, let's close this, and let's come down to our sortable column. So we want our sort that we pass up to our parent here to either be something like name or name descending. So let's make a property called new sort. And if we don't currently have a sort from our parent, new sort will be the property that we passed in. Otherwise, if the current sort is equal to our property, then new sort will be our property colon descending. And then down here, we can pass our new sort back up to our parent. So let's come back up to our use state, and let's just log sort and take a look and see if we kind of wired everything up. So sort starts off as null. If I click this, it becomes name. And if I click this again, it becomes name descending. But our table's not resorting yet. So let's go ahead and update this. Now we should just be able to split this string on the colon here. So if we call split on colon, we'll get an array with sort and descending. And if we call that on just the plain string, we'll just get one array. So let's call sort split on that colon. That's going to give us this 2-element array, which we can destructure into a sort prop and whether we're descending or not. Okay, we see another error. We're trying to call split on something that starts off as null, so we'll just add a guard. And in the case where that's undefined, we can just use an empty array. Okay, now if we log sort prop and descending, we should get it as undefined, then we get it as name and undefined, and then name and descending. And so now we can update our sort logic here to be a function that looks like this. But if descending is true, we actually want to reverse these. So we'll just copy that. But in the descending case, we'll just swap B with A. And we'll also go ahead and update the sort to be the sort prop, since this string now could include that colon descending. Okay, so with any luck, let's go ahead and refresh. we see the original order here. If we click on name, we get ascending. And if we click it again, we get descending. So that's pretty cool. Looks like we have some updates for our icon. Let's come down to our sortable column. And now we're passing in sort, which again could be that string with the colon descending. Let's just grab this logic right here, come down to our component. And now we have our actual sort prop. We can update this to be sort prop. And that should show the active state both on ascending and descending, which it does. Let's go ahead and flip this arrow if we're descending. So we'll make this an expression. And we'll just say if descending is true, we'll add rotate 180. Otherwise, we'll add nothing. So now we have this cool sortable column. And we can see we're not quite done yet. Let's go ahead and add one more else condition that resets sort to null. So now ascending, descending, and null. But our table didn't re-render. Let's come up and check our sort prop. We'll go ahead and log sort, which is coming from React state. Starts off as null, goes to name, and then it goes to name descending, and then back to null, but we're actually losing the original sort order. And this is because sort is actually a mutable method. It is actually changing the order of the people right up here out in module scope. So that's not something we want to do. Let's go ahead and make a copy of people. Refresh. Now we have the original order with koi up here. Then we get ascending, descending, and back to koi. So now things are looking pretty good. Okay, let's test out how our new sortable column works on the rest of these columns. So first, let's go ahead and just to clean this up a little bit, I'm going to get rid of the last column here and here, just so we don't have edit. And then let's go ahead, collapse all these, and we're just going to delete all of these table headers. Go ahead, get 4 more sortable columns in here. This is going to be title. This is going to be email. And this one is role. Okay, so our columns are rendering, but it looks like the spacing is a little bit off. Now this is because if we actually come back to the sortable heading and take a look at this code, we'll see that the first table heading has a PL of 4 and a PR of 3. So this is padding left of 4 units on the scale, padding right of 3 units, whereas the rest of these have a PX of 3. And this is to account just for the way the styling has set up. And now a lot of thought has gone in these components. So I usually do my best to stick with all the decisions that are made. They account for all sorts of situations like mobile and responsive desktop styles and all sorts of focus management. So let's go ahead and make sure we get this right. Now, what we want to do is basically make this component work for everything. And by default, we want PX to be 3. We can see really we're only applying PL4 if you are the first table header right here in the first table row. So if we do PX3 and then remove PL4 and save it, we won't see anything because we're actually on the bigger screen where this is applying. But if we zoom in, we'll see on the smaller screen size, these guys are fixed, whereas this one is a little bit off. So what we really want is to apply this PL4 if we are the first child. So let's say first PL4. Look at that, nudged it right over. Let's come back out to our bigger view. We'll see we have this PL6 that applies on the bigger screen above 640. Let's go ahead and throw first in front of this as well. And look at that. This is so handy, such a neat little trick I just picked up. And the fact that these compose with each other, all of these prefixes, the variances are called in Tailwind, is pretty sweet. So now we have our sortable column working for all of these columns, which is great because it means our template up here is nice and clean. So let's see what happens when we click these. All right, we got sorting on our title. Looks almost right, except this is not quite working. Let's come down and look at our logic. It looks like we still have a hard-coded name right here. So let's go ahead and use the prop we're passing in. Again, we're passing in the prop for each column to each one of these components. So this should be prop. And now if we click title, 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 it works. Email works. Role works. Let's click name and then click title. So that one didn't work. And here we're seeing if you click on a column and you don't have any sort set, then we should update the sort to the column you clicked on. But that's not right. We actually want to say if the sort prop is not equal to the prop for this column, let's get rid of this negative, then we do want to update this. So now if we click name, we should click title and it should work. And if we click it again, it should go to descending, and it does. This is checking if the sort we're passing in is equal to the prop. So if it's just title without a descending, I think this would be a little cleaner if we make this sort prop is equal to the prop and we don't have descending, then basically the new sort is going to be our prop with the descending flag. So I think that's a little bit of a cleaner way to do this. Let's check and see if it all works. Looks good. And if I click email and then click over to title, click over to role, make it descending, click over to name, things look pretty good. Now you'll notice the last time we click here, the sorting is working. We still see this. This is kind of a group focus class. We'll just remove this for now, but in my own projects, I really like using focus visible. So that kind of hover state only shows up when you are actually navigating with the keyboard. So for now, this is looking good. We still have the hover state, but when we go off of it, we don't see it. And all this looks pretty good. So we have our table here. Our product manager hopefully is going to be happy with all this work that we just did to make this work. But it turns out they come back right at the end of our day and say, hey, you know what would be awesome is if every time I click one of these, I can get it as a query parameter in the URL. I want to be able to link someone to this table when it's sorted ascending by role. So we've done all this work to put this state into React, and now we have to also put it in the URL. And this is where kind of some of the challenges from this problem come in. And kind of the natural inclination right here would be, well, we have our React state. We need to synchronize it with the URL. The URL lives outside of our app. It's not something that is in React state. So it really seems like it's a side effect, right? It's a side effect of the fact that sort has changed. We need to synchronize that state with the URL. Well, we have a perfect tool to do that with use effect. So let's go ahead and grab use effect. And right here, we basically want to update the URL with sort. Well, this is a Remix app. So we can call navigate to update the URL. And we get this from use navigate, right from Remix. And we want to do something like if we have a sort, let's go ahead and navigate to / with a question mark of sort equal to our sort state. And let's go ahead and fill in these dependencies, hit save, and give it a shot. If we click name, look at that. Question mark, sort name, name descending. Pretty cool. We've got query params. Okay, it looks like when we don't have a sort, we're going to want to navigate back to /. So let's add that in. So now we can go sort title, descending, back to /. Seems pretty good. So now we grab this URL, we share it with someone, and they load our app on it. Okay, that was weird. When we refresh the page, the table resorts, the URL goes away. I guess we're navigating here right when we render, and sort starts off at null. So maybe we only want to update this after the user starts clicking around. Maybe we'll get something like a has rendered ref using use ref from React. And if has rendered.current is empty, let's go ahead and set this equal to true, and then have an early return. Hopefully this will help. Let's go ahead and refresh. Okay, so we don't lose our URL, but our table is still not updating. And this is because our sort state is not updated right here. So we can see there's a lot of problems here. If we reload and start clicking around without ever refreshing, let's see what the back button does. That's weird. So the URL is updating, but nothing's happening to our table. So a lot of folks here will continue to go down this path and add a lot of code in order to synchronize the state that is inside of React to the URL. But that is not the right path to go down. And the fundamental reason why is because the URL is not owned by us, the developers. It's actually owned by the user. As we saw when we were clicking around, right, you can type in anything you want here. You can navigate, you can refresh. And so the data that lives in the URL is not actually something that we own as application developers. So what's happened here is that we're duplicating our state, right? The sort prop now lives both inside of React state. We try to synchronize it after we're changing it from within React, but we see that kind of falls down. So we have duplicate state. And the fundamental way to think about this is that you always want to have a single source of truth for any piece of state in your application. And because we don't own the URL, any state that lives there, that is the source of truth for that piece of state. So in our case, if sort is email right here in the URL, then we can't own that. We can't duplicate that. Instead, what we need to do is derive everything we can from that URL. So this is a case where we need to hoist our sorting state outside of React and into the URL, and then derive our sorted people from that param in the URL. So that is the refactor that we're going to do right now. So let's start by getting rid of all this stuff that we just wrote. We'll go ahead and organize our imports. So that cleans that up there. And let's go back to the home page. Click around and make sure everything still works. Looks good. Now, our sortable columns right here are calling set state basically whenever they're clicked, but we just said the state doesn't live in React, it lives in the URL. So when we click on these buttons right here, how do we update the URL? Well, instead of doing it imperatively using something like navigate or whatever imperative API the framework you're using has, there's a much easier way to update the URL from HTML, and that is with a link. So these are going to be anchor tags with an href, but we're in Remix here. So instead of using anchor tags, we're going to use the link component from Remix. And this is going to let us continue to do client-side navigations, which is exactly what we want. So links don't have an on click. Instead, they have a to prop. And for this, we're going to want to link to / sort equals new sort. So let's come back, refresh, and look at that. I hover over name. We already see down here in Chrome, this is a real anchor tag with a URL that's going to point to the URL that we want. We click on it and we get the new URL. So we've hoisted the state up to the URL, and now our React app is changing that state where it lives, the single source of truth in the URL. All we need to do now is actually derive this table data from this sort param. So let's come back up to our index component. Let's go ahead and close this. And how might we get the query param that's in the URL up here in our index component? Well, Remix has a super handy API called use search params. Comes right from Remix. And this is going to give us an array, the first element of which is the search params. If we log search params and give this a look, we'll see that this is an instance of a browser API URL search params, which has a method called get, which we can use to get the value for the sort query param. So there we can see we load the app on the first render with sort equals name, and we get name right here in our component. So let's go ahead and comment out our React state. And instead of sort coming from state, we're just going to say sort is equal to search params .getSort. Look at that. The app updated immediately just because I saved it. That was pretty cool. And we can see if we refresh, we're going to get the same behavior. So look at that. This is pretty awesome. We are basically sorting the table right now. Everything is working. And look, I can even click the back button here and everything works. So already right off the bat, you can see how much easier that was than trying to write a use effect and synchronizing our React state with the URL bar. So hopefully you're as excited about that as I am, but we're not quite done yet. So let's come here and click name. We get sort of name, and then we get name descending. That seems to work. And then we get this sort null. So this is coming from us clicking on this link. If I hover this, we can see this is from the href that's being rendered. So let's come down here to our sortable column, and we'll just add some logic that says, if we do have a new sort, we'll render this URL. Otherwise, we'll just render slash. So new sort here will be null in that case. Actually, let's go ahead and default it to null and get rid of this. It's a little cleaner. And now if we click these, look at that, sort name descending, and then back to the home page. Pretty cool. Okay, let's take a look at some of our code here. We're still passing an onClick to sortable column, but we don't need that anymore because sortable columns just render links. So we can go ahead and delete these. And let's get rid of this. And one more thing with our sortable column, we see that we're getting sort from the search params right here and passing it into each one of these. But I don't really like exposing new props on my components unless they're meant to be configured. Props on components are really like arguments to functions. That's actually exactly what they are. And this kind of signals to developers that maybe you can pass different things into this. But in our case, where we are right now in this application, this should always come from the query param. So when I can, I like to remove props. It kind of slims down the public interface of our component. So let's go ahead and remove these because we have this great hook and we can get sort directly from our component just like this. So if we come down here and paste this and get rid of this arg, and we'll also get rid of onClick. Now we should be back in business. Back button, forward button, refresh. But we have this nice tidy little component that only accepts the name of a prop and some children. So let's go ahead and inline this temporary variable right here. That's looking pretty good. And now that we don't need this, we can do the same thing right here. So now that we've cleaned that up, we have one more little thing. You'll notice that we're kind of rendering this query param here as a plain string with this colon, but we actually want to escape this string that we use so that it's safe. Any data we put in there is safe for the URL. To do that, we're going to come down to our sortable column and we're going to create a new search params, which is going to be a new URL search params object. And this is another DOM API. This takes in an object, so we can pass in sort is going to be our new sort. And this lets us replace all of this stuff right here with new search params. So if we save this, click, 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 look at that. We've got the URL escaping right here. This is much safer. So anytime you're actually navigating to or rendering a link to a URL with URL search params, this is a great little API to become familiar with. But with that, I think this is looking pretty good with one exception. We have this unused use state import, and this is my favorite part of the refactor. We go ahead and delete that. So React state is great. I don't want you to take away from this lesson that React state doesn't obviously have its purposes and is not what helps make React applications amazing. But if you can ever write a page without using React state, you definitely should. And in this case, where we have hoisted the state to the URL because that is the owner of that state, that's where the single source of truth should live, we definitely don't want to be mucking around with React state to try to synchronize it, or use effects at all to do any of that synchronization work. So if you look at our imports here, we're not importing anything from React. We just have a few of these handy helper functions from Remix. Our index component here grabs the search params from the URL when the application loads or re-renders. So that's excellent that that's handling both of those cases. And we go ahead and derive the people based off of those search params. So it's kind of like you're loading this URL and your whole UI, right? It's just derived from the URL. So anything you can get from the URL, whether it is data or markup or anything like that, you want to derive it where you can. It reduces duplicate state. And we all know state is basically the root of all evil when it comes to building these SPAs, client-side applications. And so then we do this simple compare. We get our data, and then we render these columns, mapping over our sorted people. And the columns are effectively able to mutate the URL just by rendering links, right? HTML is good at that, so that works out great. They calculate the new sort property they should have, and then they render a link. And that's basically it. We've got our whole application. This is pretty clean. It's not a lot of logic here in our index or in our sortable column. And again, we happen to be using Remix here. Remix is great. I'm absolutely loving the exploration I've been doing with Remix, but this applies to any application, whether you're using Vue or Angular or React, whether you're inside of React using, create React app with React router, you're using Next.js, which has a router, you're using Remix, which has a router, any client-side framework that has a router, this problem comes up time and time again. And you can see why. We took all that time to build the feature with React State. We already have it all working. Every kind of vector, every user flow through this table was already being handled, and that React State was accurate. And so it's totally natural to want to reach for kind of this idea of synchronizing that state with the URL. We don't own the URL. Updating it feels like a side effect. So reaching for use effect can definitely feel natural. But in this case, the URL is not something we own. It's not something we can necessarily just synchronize with. And our application has to work with it on initial load if the user changes it. So in this case, the answer was to hoist the state out of our React app and put it in the URL, and then derive everything we can about our UI from that URL. This is a lot like the idea of hoisting state within React components. If you have a tree of React components and you have two sibling components that share the same piece of state, you don't want to start trying to synchronize those state and keep duplicate copies of it in both places. The answer in React is to hoist that state up to the lowest common ancestor that is in the tree of both those components, and then pass that state down to each of those siblings that needs it. That ensures that that piece of state has a single source of truth, and all updates propagate down to the whole tree. And that's exactly the same problem we're having here, except in this case, you can think of the URL as sitting above our React app. So the lowest common ancestor here is actually like the highest part, which is the URL. And so as soon as you need components that need access to that, instead of duplicating it and trying to synchronize it, you just hoist that state out into the URL and basically pass it down. And again, that just ensures all of these links are going to work, refreshing is going to work, your life is going to be a lot better. So that was the video that I wanted to make today, and make sure I had a comprehensive look at this problem, because again, it comes up, it's going to keep coming up as long as we're making client-side applications, because the URL a lot of times can be seen as like an afterthought. You build a feature, it works, and then you want to update the URL. But the URL is actually one of the most important parts of writing these apps. And every time you create a new URL, you're exposing a new path through your application. And so you want to derive as much as you can from it. So I could keep rambling about this, but hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. All the source for this is going to be online. If you have questions, I read all the comments. And otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.